The speed of Israel's war on Iran, the dubious justifications, the airtime given to hawkish voices, and the volume of speculative coverage comes with an ominous sense of déjà vu. For anyone who witnessed or has studied the role of Western media in making the case for the United States' war on Iraq back in 2003, the parallels between then and now have been impossible to miss. Questionable claims of weapons of mass destruction, a target nation long seen as an adversary of the West, and large segments of the media working as foot soldiers for the war effort. How is it that more than 20 years since the Iraq War, this is where we're at? Chris Hedges was with the New York Times in 2003. Mr. Hedges, thank you for your time today. You left the newspaper back in 2005. You now have your own podcast on YouTube. Are you as stunned as so many are by the parallels we're seeing between the run-up to the US's war on Iraq in 2003, especially the construction of official narratives and the media's role in amplifying them, and what we're seeing now with Israel's war on Iran?
I'm not stunned because I spent 20 years overseas covering various conflicts, and most of those who call for war use lies and myths and half-truths in order to justify it. What I'm stunned at is that we fall for it once again. The parallels are, as you mentioned, quite eerie. A country, Iran, that doesn't pose any threat to us in the United States, and now imperils our existence. Its leaders embody pure evil. Freedom and democracy are at stake. If we don't act now, the next smoking gun will be a mushroom cloud, and massive bombing will bring regime change and peace and harmony. I mean, that is essentially the playbook that was used for Iraq and Afghanistan, and is the same playbook with many of the same voices, of course, that is being used to justify a war in Iran.
You talked about some of the same voices that we heard back then, back on air now. They were prominent in the US media 20 years ago. They were pushing for the invasion of Iraq. Now they're agitating for the war with Iran. What does it say about the US media landscape that these voices get so much play even after the disaster of Iraq?
Yeah, well, it's just another example of the bankruptcy of the US media, which is these people, of course, were wrong. They were wrong about Iraq, wrong about Afghanistan, wrong about Libya, wrong about Syria, but they are well funded. They migrate from administration to administration. They are, when they're not in power, ensconced in these think tanks, the Project for the New American Century, the American Enterprise Institute, the Foreign Policy Research Initiative, the Atlantic Council, the Brookings Institution, which are largely funded, of course, by the Zionist lobby and the war industry. And so they have these megaphones on the media because of who they represent, not because they actually understand. I mean, most of them are culturally, historically, linguistically illiterate about the countries they're calling the United States to attack. I frankly don't think they could probably tell the difference between Iran and Iraq. And that, I think, is a window into the vast failure of the press, going all the way back to its cheerleading for the war in Iraq based on false assumptions. But it's had a series of debacles since then, including its horrendous coverage over the genocide in Gaza.
I'd like to play two clips for you. One from CNN back in 2003, the other one from Fox News.
President Bush, and he's not alone on this, seriously doubts that UN weapons inspectors will ever have a free hand in Iraq, that Saddam Hussein will bow to all the demands and give up all his weapons of mass destruction. And so the president presses on with his call for a regime change in Baghdad, presses on, and prepares for war.
And you're talking about more than 22 weapons. That is why Israel is saying that the world was done a favor by their strike, because this is a danger not only for Israel, but the entire world, to include the United States.
Can you talk us through the language used in both those clips? How does the framing sow doubt in the mind of the audience? How does it gloss over the lack of substantiated evidence or intelligence? What is the role of this kind of reporting in building public tolerance or even support for war?
Well, it gives credibility to a fictitious narrative. Let's remember that the intelligence community's annual threat assessment, I'm quoting, quote, Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003. That was reiterated, of course, by the International Atomic Energy Agency. Netanyahu has been pushing this false claim that Iran is on the cusp of building a nuclear weapon for 3 decades. I know because in 1995 I wrote a story quoting senior Israeli officials saying precisely that. What they do is ignore verifiable fact. They ignore their own intelligence agencies. They ignore international bodies tasked, like the IAEA, with carrying out these kinds of investigations. And this again goes back to Iraq because, of course, the CIA assessments, the intelligence assessments did not show that Iraq had a weapons of mass destruction program. He had chemical weapons, that I covered that. So they cooked up their own intelligence, and that's exactly what's happening here. They ignore real intelligence and they peddle these hallucinations. And what's worse is that, of course, they're given platforms to do it.
Trump has weighed in quite forcefully behind Israel in support of this war on Iran. Now, this is the same president who, in his inaugural address, he promised to stop all wars, and he was posting just days ago, as recently as June the 15th, about peace between Israel and Iran. So what happened to the anti-war president?
Well, I think we have to remember that the character of Trump is defined by impulsiveness. He can contradict himself sometimes within the span of the same interview. He doesn't understand foreign affairs, much less anything about the Middle East. I think they've appealed to his vanity, the idea that the United States alone has the capacity to drop these bunker buster bombs. I think given the character of Trump and the fact that he shifts like the sands, I'm not surprised. Obviously, the Israel lobby has gotten to him, and you just saw it with his military parade, sees American power, and in particularly military power, as a kind of extension of his own personal power. It does look as if he is going to go ahead and carry out these strikes.
Some of the strongest opposition to this war is coming from inside the MAGA universe. We're talking about people like Tucker Carlson. He's one of the most influential voices in Trump's sphere. Carlson has called the war reckless and unnecessary. Can you please explain not only Carlson's significance, but also his position and how much weight that carries?
It carries a lot of weight within the MAGA base, of course, and he was a major force in helping to create Trump. He has a huge following, and I think that his opposition to the war is deeply damaging to the Trump brand. But I just want to throw in this caveat. Should the United States carry out attacks on the underground nuclear facilities with their so-called bunker buster bombs, and should Iran retaliate, as it says it will do, against U.S. bases and installations in the Middle East, and should, as is probable, U.S. service members be killed, then everything will change. Then you will have the base baying for blood and waving the flag. And so I watched this change after 9/11. It was instant. People drank deep from that very dark elixir of nationalism. So while the opinion polls are overwhelmingly against a conflict with Iran, should Iran be attacked and should Iran retaliate against U.S. interests, I suspect that that will change dramatically.
Mr. Hedges, if Iraq was the defining case study in how wars are sold through narrative, spin, and media complicity, what are the lessons that the media and audiences have failed to learn since then?
I really fault the media more than the audiences, because the media gives credibility to people who shouldn't have any credibility at all. The stories or the charges that they're peddling against Iran are not backed up by evidence, by verifiable fact. The audience or the viewers or readers have not been able to separate the cheerleaders from those who actually carry out studies that are grounded in research and verifiable fact. We should be looking at the annual threat assessment. We should be looking at the reports by the International Atomic Energy Agency. These are downplayed or dismissed often by these media platforms. And the ability of these people to saturate the airwaves is really a media decision. And it's made any kind of rational discussion about policies towards Iran impossible. And of course, that's the goal.
Mr. Hedges, thank you so much for your time, and we'll certainly be following your work on YouTube. Thank you very much.